At the end of the last lesson, I said, personality is an effect. Thinking patterns are the cause. Let me show you what that actually means. When a personality test calls you an introvert, what's it actually measuring? It's not measuring your behavior. It's measuring your perception of your behavior, how you think you tend to respond, how you believe you prefer to show up in social situations. That's an important distinction because the test doesn't watch you at the party. It asks you to describe yourself at the party. And those are two very different things. So before we get to the deeper problem that these tests measure the effect and not the cause, there's a more basic one. They're actually measuring your story about the effect, your self-report, filtered through your mood that day, your blind spots, your aspirations, and whatever version of yourself you were performing when you answered the questions. And then the test stops there. It gives you a label and moves on. You're an introvert, you're done. But it never asks why. Why does small talk drain you? The test doesn't ask. And the answer could be a dozen different things. Maybe your brain processes social information more deeply, and surface conversation feels like noise. Maybe you learned early on that real connection happens one-on-one and groups feel performative. Maybe comparison kicks in when you're there and there are too many people, and withdrawal is how you manage that. Each of those is a different thinking pattern. Each one would create different emotions, different actions, and different results through the tear chain, and yet they're all labeled as introvert. So the label introvert collapses all of them into one box. That's the gap. The test captures the what, your perception of how you show up. It skips the why entirely, and the why is where leverage actually lives. You've probably felt this yourself. You take a test, you read the results, and there's a moment of, yes, mostly. You see yourself in maybe 70, 80% of it, and you nod along. You share it with your friends. But there's always that piece that doesn't fit. The part you scroll past, the description that makes you think, that's not really me. Or, and this is the one nobody really talks about, there are moments where you act completely out of character. You're the quiet one who suddenly takes over a room. You're the planner who makes an impulsive decision. You're the person who never gets angry, but then you snap. And those moments feel like anomalies, like you broke your own rules. They're not anomalies, they're pattern shifts. When the context changes, the thinking shifts. When the thinking shifts, so do the emotions. When the emotions shift, you don't have the energy, or you do have energy to take whatever actions in that shift. You didn't become a different person. Your thinking just moved, and everything all the way up the pyramid moved with it. That's tear in real time. The personality test can't see this because it measured your actions. One snapshot, one self-report, one context. It captured the effect. The thinking pattern underneath, the cause, was never part of the conversation. Remember the illusion of knowing from the last lesson? You felt like you understood yourself. And in a way you did. You just understood the output, not the source. I want to tell you about someone I worked with. I'm going to call him Gabe. He is a senior leader at a tech company. 25 years in the workforce, manages relationships with the two biggest revenue drivers in the entire business. His team grew revenue by 18% in a year, while the company cut staff by 30 to 40%. Now, he'd taken the Enneagram, and it typed him as an 8, the challenger. Active control, protective of his people, decisive, action-oriented. And he wore that like a badge. I'm an 8, he said. Quote, I protect my flock. I stand up for what's right. That's who I am. And then I watched what was actually happening. He had a leader above him, let's call him Mark, who would blow up in meetings, publicly question other people's plans, ask questions, and then refuse to listen to the answers, poke holes in everything without offering any alternatives. And Gabe, this Enneagram of 8, this challenger, was tempering himself, going quiet, being submissive, swallowing his responses, and trying to be all things to all people. The Enneagram can't explain that. If you're an 8, you're an 8, decisive and protective. But here's Gabe, the same person, acting nothing like his type. And then every few weeks, the pressure would build and he'd snap. One call, he literally said to Mark, "Do you need someone to fall on a sword? I'll fall on the sword." Submissive for weeks, then explosive, then back to submissive. The Enneagram would call that unhealthy 8 behavior, or going to your stress number. Another label, another box. Still, no way to move. When we looked at his thinking patterns, something specific showed up. When Mark said, "I don't understand how your team prioritizes their work," which was what Mark actually said, here's what Gabe heard. "Why the fuck are you doing this? You're an idiot." Sorry for my French there. Same words, completely different meaning. And Gabe was reacting to his interpretation, not to what was actually said. So I said to him, "You're not reacting to Mark. You're reacting to your thought about what Mark means." That's the tear model right there in real time. The thought. He's attacking me. He thinks I'm incompetent. Was creating the emotion, the threat, the defensiveness, the stress. And the emotion was creating so much energy that, while the action was, in some cases, go quiet and absorb it, and then eventually explode. And the result? The same cycle every few weeks, except it keeps getting a little worse. And here's the part that really got him. He was doing the same thing to his team. Not the yelling, but the isolating. He was trying to protect them from the pressure by carrying it all himself, which meant they stopped thinking. They didn't even know what to think about. They stopped contributing ideas. They started coming to him for all the answers. He was building exactly what he was trying to prevent. A team that depended on him for everything. The Enneagram told him he was a protector. And he was. But the thinking pattern underneath that, "I have to carry this alone or my people will get hurt," was creating the very dependency and isolation that was burning him out. Once he saw that, once he could see that the thought was driving the whole chain, now we can work with that. Not by changing his personality, but by shifting that one thought from "I have to protect them from this" to "I need to bring them into this." They can help and they can learn. It was a different thought, a different emotion, led to a different action and a different result. The Enneagram gave him a name. His thinking patterns gave him a lever. Your VQMe report already has your thinking patterns mapped. The private VQMe call takes one of those patterns and applies it to something you're actually dealing with right now. That's where the shift happens. Please click the link below and get that scheduled if you haven't already. Because I want to tell you something about myself, because I think it'll make this click. For years, and I mean years, I had a pattern I couldn't see. I kept choosing arenas where failure had a built-in excuse. Now, in high school, I played basketball. I was 5 feet tall. I think I grew to 5'4", and I loved it. But here's what I didn't see for a long time. Part of why I chose it was because if I didn't measure up, I already had a reason that had nothing to do with me as a person. I mean, she's short, because that's easier for me to live with than she wasn't good enough. I went into male-dominated fields of science and technology and business, fields I was genuinely drawn to. But they also gave me cover. If things got hard, if I stumbled, the explanation was already built in. I never had to sit alone with the thought that maybe I just wasn't enough. I sabotaged speaking opportunities starting in high school. I made excuses for errors. I overplayed injuries and cried. None of it was calculated, it was automatic. My brain had built an entire story and system to keep me from ever being in a position where the only explanation for failure was me. And frankly, it kept me stuck. Now, if you'd have given me a personality test during those years, I would have probably been called driven, maybe resilient, a risk taker, a pioneer. And on the surface, I was. Those are the actions, that's the output. But through the terror lens, the thinking pattern was, I am fundamentally not enough. And if I play an arena where the deck is already stacked against me, I never have to find out for sure. The emotion that created? A strange mix of comfort, restlessness, and uncertainty. Safe, but stuck. The action? Keep choosing situations where failure could be explained by something other than me. The result? I could always point to external reasons, and I never had to face the internal question. No personality test would have caught that. No label would have surfaced it. It took seeing the actual thinking pattern from my own VQ profile, that the one running underneath all the actions. I had to understand that to see what was really happening. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The excuses stopped making sense, not because I forced myself to stop making them, but because the thinking that needed them had shifted. That's the difference between seeing yourself in a description and actually seeing your thinking. One feels familiar, the other creates a little bit of movement. If you've taken your VQMe report and you're wondering what's underneath your patterns, not the label, but the source, that's what we walk through on the call. The link's right below. So let's bring all this together. Personality tests measure your perception of what you do. The actions line on the TERR model. They capture the effect and call it a type. Thinking patterns, what VQMe actually measures, that lives at the thoughts level. The cause, the source of the emotions and the energy, the actions and the results. And when you only measure the effect, you get the illusion of knowing, feeling seen without seeing clearly. When you measure the cause, you get something you can actually shift, not by forcing a different behavior, but by seeing the thinking that's driving it. The next lesson of this course, I'm going to show you what actually happens when thinking shifts and how to do it, not in theory, but in the specific moments where it matters. How tears become signals instead of problems. How the tear chain moves when the bottom of the pyramid shifts. And we'll talk about what comes next, because understanding the model is one thing. Seeing your patterns in it is where it gets real. Now, before you go, think about this. One thing a personality test told you about yourself that you've been treating as permanent. Not wrong necessarily, just you thought it was, that's the way I am. Like it's a fact about you and who you are rather than a pattern in how you think. And I want you to, if you're willing, drop it in the comments. You might be surprised how many people have had the same experience. And if you're already seeing the difference, if this lesson put something in a new frame for you, the private VQMe call is where we make it specific to you, not generic, all yours. Hey, the link's below, and hope to see you on the call. If not, I hope to see you in the next lesson.